welcome to Dollars and Making Sense, a weekly show about finance, money and investing. I'm your host, Ray Treverson from OTG Capital. We broadcast locally on Radio Northern Beaches and around Australia on the Community Radio Network, complements of the Community Broadcasting Association of Australia. Fascinatingly, this community radio network has well over 400 stations. We are picked up by about 14, 15 or so, mainly regional stations outside of the Sydney area. So thank you for listening to us. We always appreciate that. And today I have Stuart Sheary from the Institute of Financial Professionals of Australia. He is a subject matter expert at IFPA, and we also provide our content that we do on this radio show to the IFPA people, which they then use for training and continuous development for the tax agents that are their members. So there's about 4,000 members. And I recently interviewed one of Stuart's colleagues, Natasha Panagis, who is a specialist in super. And she tells me there's something like 22,000 additional people that will come to IFPA either as members or have an affiliation. So it's quite a big crowd. And I'm really pleased. We get a lot of hits on the website and obviously this content as well. So Stuart, welcome back to the show.
That'd be great.
Now, the last time we had you on the show, we were talking about hardship and accessing super. And I, again, was quite frankly surprised. We got hit quite a lot on that particular article. It really stimulated a lot of interest. And I get the feeling that today's subject is going to be the same. And we've titled it A Retiree's Guide to Releasing Cash Flow from the Home. How topical, how people in Sydney talk about real estate. It never happens, does it, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's people's biggest asset, the family home. So it's also a good place to look for extra income as well.
I'm pleased that you came up with this idea. This is Stuart's idea, ladies and gentlemen, that we talk about this because I have a lot of people wanting to come on the show and spruik about schemes, and we've had a lot of people come on and want to talk about SMSFs and buying real estate, and I get really cranky because a lot of them are not valid ways of using your super. But today's Retiree's Guide, I think, is a really, really good, simple way that I think retirees can look at again. If you need extra cash flow. We did a show a number of years ago called Side Hustles, and I'd never heard the term side hustle. These are kind of like side hustles, aren't they? So the first idea, and again, this is a little controversial because I'm not a big fan of this particular portal, but letting your home out for short-term lodging. One idea growing in popularity are people listing their home for short-term stays on platforms like Airbnb. And is this a good idea? Over to you, Stuart.
Well, I'll let the audience decide whether it's a good idea and it's appropriate to them, but it can be a way of generating income, right? And it is popular, as you mentioned. I mean, in Sydney, there's 14,000 Airbnbs out there. 14,000. Well, that's according to Dr. Google, which he doesn't always get it right, but Dr. Google says 14,000. And apparently also they're getting on average $240 a night with an occupancy rate of 77%. So if you run the numbers, that's $65,000 a year. But
shut the front door, really?
Obviously, in those scenarios where we're talking about people who might be pretty much permanently vacating their house, but you can potentially put a granny flat out the back, or a room, or perhaps, let out your place for a very short period of time on some of these short-term platforms. But just keep in mind, there are some downsides by way of tax. And if you're an age pensioner, it can also impact your age pension.
So let's talk about those. So it's talking about extra tax. It's a great way to earn some cash, but you've got to pay tax. I always thought, if you're paying more tax, that's a good thing because you're actually making more. Why is that? Why do you say it's a concern then, Stuart?
Well, I personally don't love paying tax, but consider it. But yeah, look, the income you receive from these listings is taxable income, assessable income rather. Good side is that you can get some deductions. So by way of an interest expense on a mortgage, that can be proportionate expense and can be now deductible. So too can utility expenses. They can also reduce your your tax bill there will be deductible. But the real kicker is capital gains tax. Capital gains tax can rear its ugly head when you come to sell. So because your home was not entirely used for as your main residence, it was partly used for income producing purposes, that main residence exemption may be scaled down a bit. So keep that in mind, and potentially could outweigh the income that you've received over the years.
I guess that conjures an interesting question then. I mean, I'm actually getting close to retirement age myself, but I plan to keep working, and I operate, as you can see in the background here, this is my home office. I've got an office in the city, in the Central Business District for OTG Capital, but I do a lot of my stuff here at home. I don't need to go into the office in town all the time. So does the small office have an impact on that, or is that something that the ATO sort of looks at and goes, that's not really a CGT event?
Oh, good question. The small office, it depends on most people who work from home do not claim just claim the basic work from home allowance. They don't treat it as a separate place where you're producing assessable income. For most people, they're limiting their deductions to that statutory amount that you're allowed. And so they don't typically have capital gains tax consequences, because part of the reason is their deductions are limited there. But if you are allocating a part of the home for income producing purposes, aside from work from home, then yes, that expenses relating to that area can be deductible, but you also potentially opt for CGT.
Yeah, I think one of the big ones where I sit there, hand on heart, and breathing not a sigh of relief, but I sleep comfortably at night, is I don't charge myself rent. So even though I operate, my consulting business and my advisory, because we have an AFSL and we do a number of things, but I don't actually charge myself rent. So from a CGT perspective, it's more, I look at this more so as a lifestyle choice, that it saves the wrinkles and the hard work of getting on the bus every day to go into the city. So I think that's a big tick in the plus column. Okay, yeah, so age pension. So age pension. So this can impact people's age pension as well?
Absolutely, on two fronts. So age pensioners, as you're probably aware, and so to an audience aware, that you're subject to an income test and an asset test. And the test that gives you the least favorable result is the one that applies. So if you're asset rich and income poor, the asset test will apply. If you're income rich and asset poor, then it's the income test applies, and vice versa, right? So under the income test, the income you receive from putting your place up on Airbnb, that's going to be assessable income in Centrelink size, which can reduce your entitlement under the income test. But the real kicker will probably be under the asset test, okay? Because part of that home now is not what we call an exempt asset. So you could have a home in Point Piper worth $10 million. That's an exempt asset, and if that's your only asset, you'll get the full age pension because the family home is an exempt asset. But if you have a little granny flat down the back that you're letting out short term, well, suddenly you're going to say, well, no, that part of the property is not your main residence, and each square meter of that granny flat is an assessable asset, and we are going to assess you accordingly. So it could wipe out your age pension.
Yeah, I must say, my mum passed away about 3 years ago, and she was on the age pension for a long, long time. And I guess I don't know whether it's a generational thing, but my mum and dad came out from Italy in the 50s, and so this notion, you've got to get your government pension, and so the idea that this entitlement that you must take the pension. I always looked at my mum and dad and I said, I would never aspire to want to be able to get a full pension. If I'm getting a full pension, that means, in my view anyway, it's like I kind of failed. I mean, when you look at the amount of money that the age pension is these days, it's not a huge amount of money, is it?
It's not a huge amount of money, but a lot of Australians are not getting the full age pension, but a part age pension. So their means might be a little bit higher, and then they get that pensioner concession cards, which most Australians absolutely love. So there's the pensioner concession card gives you a whole range of discounts and cheap pharmaceuticals.
I must say, I have a travel card, pensioners travel card these days. I love it. $2.50 all day. It's hilarious. I mean, I got checked one time by a traffic a transport copper, and he looked at me. He says, "You over 60?" And I showed him my driver's license. He goes, "Oh, okay, fair enough." So my wife and I love it. Well, anyway, we move on. I'll talk about Airbnb another time and its impact on a whole range of things. But the rental market here in Sydney, it shouldn't surprise. $240 a night. Wow, that's some decent income. If you're making that much on your property, maybe it's worth not getting the pension anyway. Who knows? Anyway, let's move on. Idea 2: go on an extended holiday. I like that idea, and rent out the home. Okay, so is it a good idea to rent out the home, and what are the pitfalls? So what's the story there, Stuart?
Well, my thinking is, when people retire, they often like to treat themselves to that extended holiday that they've denied themselves over the years. So, some people might go on a 12-month cruise or go caravanning around Australia.
Mm-hmm.
One idea might be to rent out the home while you go on that extended holiday, because you might end up coming home with more money in the bank than when you'd left. So I'd certainly recommend considering it. And for another reason is because there's some free kicks, if you like, from the tax office and Centrelink when it comes to temporarily leaving your home for a period of time. So if we look
what are those free kicks, Stuart?
Well, if we look at tax, so we spoke about capital gains tax in the context of short-term stays, but let's look at it in the context of you leaving the home. It's your main residence. You move out for 6 months or 12 months and you rent it out. Well, under tax law, we've got what we call the temporary absence rule, which allows you to continue to treat that home of yours as your home for CGT purposes. You're going to continue to call that your main residence, even though you're going around and on a holiday, meaning you can rent it out for potentially 6 years. So you can be away for 6 years, renting it out for that period, and still claim a main residence exemption during that time.
Wow. I didn't realize it was that long.
6 years. And it's indefinite if you're not charging rent. So if the home is not producing income, then you can depart that home and still treat it as your main residence for CGT purposes indefinitely if it's not income producing, and you're not taking 2 bites of the cherry and treating something else as your main residence. So don't call that caravan your main residence when you're going on that caravan holiday.
Fair enough. Wow, didn't realize. Okay, so look, we're at about halftime. You're here on Dollars and Making Sense, a weekly show about finance, money and investing. I'm your host, Ray Treverson. I'm really pleased to have at the microphone and camera this week Stuart Sheary, who is a subject matter expert from the Institute of Financial Professionals of Australia. We're going to take a short break and we'll be back with you in just a moment. Hi, and thank you for listening to Dollars and Making Sense, a weekly radio program about finance, money and investing on Radio Northern Beaches and nationally on the Community Radio Network around Australia. The views, comments and opinions aired during our program should not be construed or viewed as financial advice. Any commentary is general advice only and does not take into account your objectives, financial situation or needs. You should consider whether the advice is suitable for you and your personal circumstances. If in doubt, you should contact an authorised licensed financial planner. We welcome questions and feedback, and you can get in touch with us via our blog, social media channels or email. Please search for Dollars and Making Sense in your favourite podcast platform or check out our blog at otgcapital.com.au/blog. Hi, and welcome back to Dollars and Making Sense, a weekly show about finance, money and investing. I'm your host, Ray Treverson, and with me at the microphone this week is Stuart Sheary, subject matter expert from the Institute of Financial Professionals Australia. Now, before we went to the break, we were talking about how older couples can tap into some cash flow, some side hustles, but what are the impacts on their age pension, tax, capital gains, etc. And before we went to the break, we were talking about rentals, and one of the other aspects we kind of missed was the partial exemption. So, Stuart, you wanted to pick up on one of those points as well before we moved on.
Yeah, so we talked about the tax free kick, if you like, the fact that you can continue to treat your home as your main residence for CGT purposes while you're going away on holidays and renting out your former home.
Mhm.
But we didn't mention the age pension benefits because Centrelink quite generously also give you a free kick there, and they'll let you continue to treat your house as your home for up to 12 months, even though you're not living there. So you can go traveling around in your caravan and still get the full age pension potentially, because your home will remain an exempt asset. So, but be careful, holiday extends beyond 12 months. Centrelink will probably start to assess your home as an asset.
Sorry, question without notice then. I mean, if you go away for 11 months and 3 weeks, come home for a week and then head on out again, does the clock restart, or is it 12 months, over a period of time?
It's not a lifetime limit of 12 months. So if you genuinely come back and reestablish residency and then go back out, my understanding, don't quote me on it, but that 12-month clock would reset, but it's got to be genuine. So you've actually got to come home. Yeah.
Well, it's something I might ask. Justin Bott from Centrelink Services Australia comes on the show quite regularly. I think I might pick up on this one because that's a really interesting thing, because it says here a couple can still get the some age pension under the income test if their income combined is below $3,934 per fortnight. And that's a little over $100,000. And
I know, isn't it? So
that's tax-free, guys. That's tax-free.
I didn't say tax-free. It's still taxable. But what I'm saying is, if you can potentially earn up to 100,000 combined and still get a part age pension under the income test for age pension purposes. It's only going to be a really small pension,
right?
But a pension.
But that 100K then is split between the couple, and then you're paying tax on 50K, which you've then got your thresholds and all that kind of palaver.
Oh, you're absolutely right. Yeah, you probably wouldn't be paying too much tax if you split $50,000 between two members. Sorry, $100,000 between two members of a couple, because you've also got the SAPTO tax offset there. So.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, let's move on. So idea 3, build a granny flat in the backyard. A lot of people are building granny flats in their backyard. Can this be a good investment and help Australia's housing shortage? Oh, my word.
Well, I'm not sure about the housing shortage, but granny flats can be a good investment. It really depends on what you're hoping to achieve. So if you're looking at, for example, getting a good income stream, then you'd really be needing to look at, well, what's the rental returns in the area? You don't want to overspend on a granny flat. You may not be able to recoup your monies through the new income stream. Another reason why you might want to invest in a granny flat might be to add value to the home. So, but again, because some people out there want dual occupancy places, and a granny flat can increase the market value of your home. But again, be careful about overcapitalizing, because the amount you spend on the granny flat may exceed the price that people are willing to pay for your home. So just be careful of that. But the third point I'd make is that a lot of people just want to benefit from it personally. So they might want their adult kids to live there perhaps, or have relatives stay with them. We've got a granny flat out the back, and it can be quite, there's some advantages there to having your kids stay out the back. Living even for peppercorn rent. You might want to charge your kids some lodging fees. Good thing there is that the tax office will not tax you on that, because they see it as kind of like being a family arrangement.
Sure.
So the tax office won't, tax you on that $200 a week that your kids pay you for staying in your granny flat. So that's good. And also keep in mind that for age pension purposes, Centrelink will also kind of disregard that income that you get from your kids for lodging as well.
It's fascinating. And again, I've mentioned that my folks came out to Australia from Italy in the 50s. And when we go back and visit my cousins and the extended family, the idea of a multi-generational home is something that's been long established in Italy, because home ownership is nowhere near as prevalent as it is here. And so lots of people rent, but if they actually do have a home, it's usually 2 or 3 stories. And as you get older, you go down the not the pecking order, because if you're on the ground floor, you've got the least amount of stairs to go up. So the young kids are always going up the stairs. But what my point is, though, is that multi-generational living is becoming more of a fact of life now, particularly in cities like Sydney, Melbourne, and increasingly now Brisbane, where the median price of Brisbane homes have actually gone above Melbourne. So the price rises there in anticipation of the Olympics and what's happening at the Goldie is having a major impact on intergenerational wealth transfer, and also, as you rightly say, Stuart, the way people are living as families and extended families. And so that's a really interesting one. Okay, so let's move on. Idea 4, take advantage of the government-backed reverse mortgage, aka the Home Equity Access Scheme. Now, before we launch into this discussion, I could do an entire show on reverse mortgages because there's a lot of product out there that does this, but we are going to be talking specifically about what the federal government provides. Over to you, Stuart.
Yeah, so the Home Equity Access Scheme, or HEAS for short, it's kind of like is a government-backed reverse mortgage, effectively. Mm-hmm. And the good thing about it is you're dealing with the government, and the government's going to look after you. Otherwise, they're going to be out of a job in the next election. So they give you pretty favourable terms. So you can effectively borrow from the government on a cheap interest rate of 3.95% currently. So it's well below the market interest rate on a mortgage, that's for sure. 3.95%, very good. But there are some, I wouldn't say downsides, but there are some limits on this scheme. So what the government will say is, look, if you allow us to place a charge on your home or any real estate interest that you hold, really, so it may not be your home, might actually be an investment property that you allow the government to place a charge or encumbrance on, they will provide you with an income stream of 150% of the maximum age pension. So it's really more of an income stream, if you like, that you can get from the government. So there are, you can get small lump sum advances in lieu of these fortnightly payments, but they're quite limited. So by way of background, if you're thinking about, if you want like hard numbers, say we've got a single pensioner, their maximum age pension is around about $1,200 a fortnight, a little bit less than that, but around about $1,200 per fortnight. Well, under the HEAS scheme, if they're happy for the government to place a charge on their property, they can borrow from the government an extra $600 per fortnight. So that would bring up their fortnightly income from $1,200 a fortnight to $1,800 a fortnight. Okay. So I guess what I'm trying to tease out here is that the maximum that you can borrow is limited to your the combined amount of the age pension, and the borrowing amount can't exceed the maximum age pension. Gets a little bit technical, so let me give you another example.
But I think one of the reasons that's there is so that people won't overcommit or overburden themselves with, because when you talk about a charge, that's like a lien or a caveat. So in other words, they have a grip on your property, don't they?
Yeah, absolutely. So when you pass away or sell, the government will be repaid their loan with the proceeds. But the good thing is that the proceeds, or what you have to pay back, won't exceed the value of the home. It's not like when you pass away, the government will say, oh, hang on here, that loan has actually gone a lot bigger than what we were expecting, and your house isn't worth as much as we thought, so we're going to go after other assets. It's going to be limited to that home that you've put a charge on.
That is a really good deal then, isn't it? You're protected, and you protect your legacy as well, so that you're not leaving behind a burden of debt to any of your beneficiaries.
That's right. Your other assets, estate assets, will be protected.
Cool. And I guess, just out of interest, a good place to start would end up, again, Services Australia, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Give Services Australia a call. Be patient. They don't pick up straight away all the time, and give them a call, or your local FIS officer. I would highly recommend, if they're still doing it. Not too sure if they are, but
they are.
Yeah,
Financial Information Service.
Yeah,
Justin and I talk about it all the time, and I actually recommend it. One of our friends who's just turned 70, and she really needs some help, and she went to the local office in Brookvale and talked to a FIS, and she just came back effusive, going, "Wow, that was absolutely brilliant." ... And it was the government. So it was that last bit. It was like, oh, it was the government as well. So, but no, it's a great service. Highly recommend.
Yeah, and for those on DVAs, I think they've got their own scheme as well, where they can get advice. I think they might be perhaps reach out to the local RSL club, I think, and they might be able to put them in touch with someone who can provide that same service.
Sure. And are there any cons to getting involved with HERS?
Well, of course, you're going to be leaving less money in the estate for beneficiaries. There is an interest rate of 3.95%. That interest rate could go up in time. On the flip side, though, that is a relatively low interest rate compared to the market. So, yeah, I mean, the biggest one being, of course, is there's now a charge or encumbrance placed on your home as well. So, yeah.
Just can't go and sell it without having that taken off and making amends to the money that you've been advanced.
Exactly right. So if you were to sell it before you pass away, you'd need to sort out that
okay, so look, Stuart, we're just about out of time. I always love to leave our listeners and watchers with some key takeaways. What are some handy online resources that people can go and look up this information that we've been talking about today?
Yeah, so the tax office, great website when it comes to implications of letting your place out on short-term stays. So just Google ATO, Airbnb, or short-term stays. They'll run you through the capital gains tax implications. And of course, Centrelink have a wealth of information as well on their site.
MoneySmart as well, moneysmart.gov.au.
Quite possibly. I haven't researched MoneySmart recently, but it wouldn't surprise me if they have some great information.
It's a great website. Excellent. Ladies and gents, if you ever want a wonderful free resource, go to moneysmart.gov.au. It's run by the government. You're not going to get sort of ripped off by salespeople, or I shouldn't say that. I'm a salesperson, but I mean, I don't rip people off. But, people have a sense of safety if they're accessing government information with no hidden agendas. So, look, Stuart, there've been some brilliant ideas. There are 4 there. So we talked about a granny flat. We talked about HERS. We talked about Airbnb. And so, look, ladies and gentlemen, there's some really good ideas. Stuart Sheary from IFPA, thank you again for visiting us here at Dollars and Making Sense, and hopefully we'll have you back again in the near future.
All right, enjoy your day.